Hello there, good morning everyone. Meteorologist Jim Dickey here in the ABC7 Hurricane Center. Time for another edition of Tracking the Tropics. It's Friday, September the 7th. We're only 3 days away from what is the historic peak of activity in the Atlantic. That's September 10th, also the one-year anniversary of Hurricane Irma making landfall here in southwest Florida. And sure enough, it is active in the Atlantic. Of course, Gordon came and went, made landfall on the northern Gulf Coast as a tropical storm. Currently, we have Tropical Storm Florence out there. That's only telling part of the story. At one point a couple days ago, it was a Category 4 hurricane, but as expected, shear hit it and it has weakened quite a bit. We also have two invests, two tropical waves that look like they're going to develop before long in the far eastern tropical Atlantic that we'll bear watching over the next couple days as well. But let's begin with Florence. This is the 5 a.m. advisory from the NHC. Winds 65 miles per hour. Just the rapid intensification followed by rapid weakening, very rare to see. That's exactly what occurred. So it ramped up to Category 4 strength, moved into that area of high shear, where it is now, and then weakened back down to 65 miles per hour. Go back to that satellite presentation, and the core is still holding together. Now the low-level center is off to the south of where you see that sort of circle, that yellow circle, which is some heavy thunderstorm activity. But because you still see that sort of circle holding together, it's a sign that, again, it's fighting off that shear. It's not going to dissipate and fall apart entirely. And so there's where it is now. It's actually moving through what is the peak of that shear area. It's headed to the west. And notice, as it gets towards where Bermuda is, it's going to get into a pocket of lighter wind shear. And with that in mind, it is expected to re-intensify. So this weakening trend, that's likely to come to an end here soon. It's going to stick around a 65 mile per hour, 70 mile per hour tropical storm for the next 24 to 48 hours. From there, it hits that lighter shear. The water's definitely warm enough here for it to strengthen, and that's what the official forecast for the NHC calls for. Note the path, actually taking a little bit of a dive to the south. That in the short term is something to watch if it does make that turn. Right now it's headed due west. We'll see if we lose any latitude. We, of course, don't want it to lose latitude. We want it to jump as far north as it can, as quickly as it can. By the time we get to Wednesday, in all likelihood, Florence is somewhere between Bermuda and the east coast of the United States, potentially as, once again, a major hurricane. Now, what are the factors in Florence's movements? What I like to do when I try to figure out where a system is going to go is I pick out a window of movement, and I slowly but surely narrow that down. So right now, you can't rule out anything from a turn out to sea around Bermuda to an East Coast impact. So right now, it's being steered by the Atlantic Ridge. The big factor in the forecast of Florence's movement going forward is going to be the area of high pressure over the northeast United States that will move off the coast of the United States and act as sort of a block. Now, it's going to interact with that Atlantic Ridge. If everything sets up to the east of Florence, there's going to be a path for it to escape. But if high pressure holds off to its north, which some models suggest, then it's going to tend to block that into the coast. And that's why when you look at the model plots, there's sort of those two scenarios playing out here. Again, these spaghetti plots, as they're commonly called. Each individual line, a different model forecast, and you can sort of see those two different solutions lining up. One that shows the Atlantic Ridge becoming the main steering influence, turning that before it gets to the East Coast, and one showing the influence of the blocking high, keeping a lot of those lines piled up to the south, and then a number of them showing a path headed towards the Carolinas. It's still very early in the game with Florence. You, of course, can't rule out an East Coast impact, but at the same time, you can't say for sure there's going to be one. It's something that needs to be watched for anyone really from South Carolina all the way up through Cape Cod. This needs to be watched very closely through the weekend and next week as this path becomes a bit more clear as to where Florence is going to go. And then we jump east, and we have our two tropical waves, both of which, per the NHC, have a 90% development chance. So let's go through them one by one. The first wave, Invest 92L. Let's look at the satellite presentation this morning. If you notice right in the center, try to zoom in here, you can sort of see what looks to be a little curved, swirling band that's trying to be drawn into what appears to be a center of the storm. This, to me, looks like it's on the verge of becoming, at the very least, a tropical depression. Also of note, though, we saw what was a large area of heavy thunderstorm activity sort of collapse a bit. So that's a sign that maybe it's still struggling a little bit here. Either way, again, 90% chance for the NHC. This will likely be named a depression, if not a tropical storm, later on today. And this is one to watch for any of us living on the Gulf Coast and in Florida. Because when you look at the model tracks, a good bulk of them, and we look over models across the board, a good many of them keep this on a nearly due westerly, if not west-southwesterly path. Bring this into the Caribbean. And history tells us when tropical systems get into the Caribbean, we have to watch out in the Gulf. It's way too early in the game with this, too, to have any definite idea of where this is going in the long range, what type of impacts would be possible in the United States. And again, just for now, it's something to keep an eye on. Then we get back to the coast of Africa, and this is actually looking even stronger than 92L. This is 93L. It just moved off the coast yesterday. Not tough to pick out that broad circulation going on with the thunderstorm activity that has moved out into the Atlantic Ocean. Much like Florence before it, this is going to develop pretty quickly in all likelihood. In fact, the NHC is already talking tropical storm by tonight. Actually, something interesting to see here. Which of these two becomes Helene and which of these two becomes Isaac? It's possible this could jump and become the H name before 92L. We'll see how the day and the weekend plays out. Either way, in all likelihood, that is going to take a slightly more northerly path. This is what the spaghetti plots for 93L looks like. But again, until something actually develops here, it's tough to take much stock in these models. But again, a more northerly path is favored by those spaghetti plots as of this morning. So, here are some takeaways. Florence has weakened back to a tropical storm, but it is expected to re-intensify. It's not out of the realm of possibility. In fact, the official forecast calls for Florence to be between Bermuda and the United States as a major hurricane by the time we get to the middle of next week. And there is absolutely a threat to the East Coast from Florence. Not a threat to Southwest Florida, but from South Carolina up through Cape Cod, that's the sort of window we'll be watching from this. And there's still a chance it turns out to sea and misses entirely. Meanwhile, two tropical waves out by Africa, both of which are on their way to development. Helene and Isaac on their way before long, both of which we'll also be watching closely through the weekend and next week. But right now, for Florida, for Southwest Florida, no immediate threats, at least through the weekend. Of course, again, we'll be watching all of this closely over the weekend. Stay with us for updates on air and online here at ABC 7. I'll be back with another update likely on Monday. So I'll see you then.